Yep, I'm here. Hello? Hello? Okay. Um, Give me 1 second. Can you see this? All right. And hello. I'll just wait a couple more minutes for people to get settled in here. So for those of you who are here already, we're going to be using Replit to create our webpage. So if you haven't already, if you could create a Replit account, we're going to be creating an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript page through Replit. So you should only need to put in your email address and a password to create an account. And yeah, we'll use that to get started. Okay, so for those of you who are just came in, we're going to be using Replit. So if you can create a Replit account if you don't already have one. Um, yeah, that'll be helpful for this workshop. If you could let me know in the chat when you've created an account and you're ready to get started, um, then yeah, we can go ahead when you're ready. I'll put the link in the chat here, everybody. Um, so yeah, go ahead and let me know when you have your account set up, and yeah, we can get started. Okay, well, I'll get started, and you can follow along and listen in while you're creating your account. Um, but for now, yeah, welcome to the Intro to Web Design workshop. By the end of this tutorial, you should have a basic grasp of web design concepts, and you should be able to build your own beginner website. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So first we're going to create an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript project. Can exit out of that. And oh, and by the way, feel free to stop me if you have any questions or you'd like me to explain something again. But yeah, you should see something that looks generally like this. You'll notice that over here you'll have three files: index.html, script.js, and style.css. In the index.html file, this is where you're going to be creating the structure of your website. And I'll be going over what these different attributes and tags mean. But in general, the HTML file is where you're going to be telling your page what elements you want, what things you want. So for example, an image, a paragraph, a title that you want to be displayed on your page. We're not going to use script in this tutorial, but if you wanted to learn more about it, scripting with JavaScript is very useful. Can help you with things like forms and more backend stuff as well. And finally, we have the style.css, which is a way to change the way your page looks. So you can change font color and size. You can change the dimensions of an image. And you can just in general make your page look different. So let's jump right into creating the page. So you'll see here, one of the main things about HTML that you'll notice is what are called tags. So this right here that I've highlighted, head, is a tag. Each opening tag will also have a closing tag. And so what you have here is the opening of the head and the closing of the head. What the head actually does is it gives a little bit of background information about your page. So for example, right here, the title of your page, which can be seen, if you can see my cursor here, index.html-new project-replit, that's the title of your page. So right here, if we change this to my new project, and we run our page, then we should be able to, looks like it'll take a little while to load, but you'll see that changing the text in here changes what's shown on the tab. It's the title of your page. Let's see. So going into more of what's actually shown on your page, a couple of important tags that you'll use often are header tags, which displays a header. Header 1. We have paragraphs, and actually we have subheaders. So H2 is a subheader for the section header 1. Header 2. No. And say we add another one, another subheader, header 2.1. Just like that. And we have our main header and our two subheaders. Great. So now let's say we want to add some content to our page. To put paragraphs, we have the P tag. This is a paragraph. Okay, so in these tags, we have basic display data that's going to be shown on your page. So for example, what you see inside the tag is what's displayed on your page. Another thing that we can do, another tag we can use is an image. Image. Now you'll notice that the image tag actually does not have a closing tag. The reason for that is that we're not actually putting, say, for example, text, or we're not putting anything inside the tag per se, but instead what we're going to have is a source. And that source is where we're pulling the image from. So everybody, why don't you take a minute to find an image on anything. Just look up an image on Google. Let's see, forest image. And we'll find a nice image here. And what we can do is we can copy the URL. And paste that into the source. And when we see our project, we now have the image on our page. does everything so far make sense? Tell me if I'm moving too fast. If you could just in the chat, let me know if you need clarification or if everything is making sense, or I move on. Great.
I do have a question. How did you do the image source?
Oh, okay. So go ahead and on Google, just search up any image you'd like. It can be literally anything. Google image, and let's say I just chose this one, and you can right click on it and open the image in a new tab, and that's how I got here. And I copied the URL and I pasted that into the source here, and that's how the image tag and when the page loads, that's how it knows to pull the image from this URL. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. So moving on, a couple more useful tags that we have here. Lists, unordered and ordered lists. So what this is, we have an unordered list here, and this tag can act kind of like a folder for these items, these list items. LI stands for list item in the unordered list. So when we run this, we have two list items, and notice how they're bullet pointed because they're unordered. If we wanted a numbered list, we could change this to OL for ordered list. And we'd have a numbered list. We can also add page breaks. Notice again that because we're not technically putting anything inside this tag, because it's not the same type of tag as a header or paragraph, we don't really have a closing for it, but instead we're adding this slash into the BR. And what that does is it adds a line break. So if we wanted to space out, let's put it between our lists so that we can space them out and see what's happening here. We can see that we have a bunch of space in between our two lists. Let's say we wanted to add an actual line break, like a visible line between two sections. We can add an HR, a horizontal rule, and that'll add a nice little line to separate our two sections. And notice how we still have our line breaks before and after, but our horizontal rule is in between the spacing that we have here. So yeah, that's another thing I wanted to touch upon, is that everything on a page inside the body, which the body is the main content of the page, is shown and displayed in order. So first we have our header 1 and we have our header 2, and it's always going to display in the order that it's shown in the code. Let's see. We can also add links to other pages. So we're going to use something called an anchor tag. And we're going to inside call it link. Now, here I'd like to introduce a new concept called an attribute, which tells the page a little bit more about the element that you're creating. So here what we're going to do, and actually this is what we did with source. Source is an attribute. It's an attribute for the image tag. We're going to give the anchor tag an attribute called href. And this is just going to tell the page where to link to. So we can just link to Google. And we're going to have a link that when you click it, we can't open Google here, but when we click it, it's going to go to Google's webpage. Let's see, I'd like to open, here we go. So what we have here is I just ran the project in a new tab. And if you notice, here is what I was talking about with the title of the page from the head. Title is my new project, and that can be seen up here on the tab. And we can also see all of our elements here. And run. Wait 1 second. There we go. So yeah, we'll have a link that then links to Google. Moving on. So the last tag that I'd like to go over today is called a div. And this is one of the most important tags that you'll use. Let's put it down at the bottom. The div is like a folder. It's very useful for structuring your code so that everything can be in different folders. Let's say that we wanted a bunch of paragraphs. Add a bunch of paragraphs in this folder. 1, 2, 4, and 5. Now, when we style our page later on, the div will allow us to, for example, style all of these paragraphs together instead of having to do a style for each of them. It's also good for page layout, for keeping track of where everything is. It's good for organization. And we'll see a little bit of that later on in this tutorial as well. But just know that the div tag is kind of like a folder that can hold other tags in it. And you can have multiple divs inside of divs. So you can have another folder tag inside, and you can even have another one. And let's say we have 6. We have another paragraph nested all the way in 3 div tags, and it'll be down there. So that's a basic overview of HTML. I'd like to move on to CSS, which is more of the styling of the tags we have so that we can change how our page looks. Before we do that though, does anyone have any questions? Is everything making sense so far? I'll assume that everything is okay. Okay, I'll move on. So in the head, you'll notice that you see a tag called link href equals style.css, rel equals style sheet, type equals text slash CSS. What this is doing is it's linking our HTML page to a style sheet, which you can see right here in files, called style.css. We're telling the page that we're getting the styles from a file called style.css. There's that href attribute again. Rel equals style sheet. We're grabbing a style sheet. And the type is CSS. So if we go into style.css, we can start changing how these elements look. So if you want to just change, let's say, the color of this text, say we want to change the color of this H1, we can say H1, and we're going to be grabbing all of the H1 tags on the page, and we're going to say color green. And the color of the header 1 tag is now green. We can say the same thing for H2, color blue. And you'll see all of our header 2s are blue. Another way to grab elements without calling their specific tag type, like H1 or H2, is through something called an ID. So let's say we wanted to change the color of this first H2 tag, but not the color of the second H2 tag. If you notice, when we set the color of the H2 tag to blue, both of them turn blue. But if we want only one of them to change color, we can set another attribute called ID equals blue header. Then instead of making the H2 blue, we can make the blue header blue, and that'll only do the H2 with the ID of blue header. Now be careful. Before using an ID, you're going to have to add a special character, the £. And this will symbolize that we're looking for an ID, not a type of tag. Be careful with that. Remember to add that £, if you're trying to find an ID. It's a common mistake. And as you can see now, only the first header is blue. Another thing we can do is, just like ID, there's something called a class, which for ID, you only want one element on each page to have the same ID. So let's say we made this H2 have an ID of blue header. You would not want to have another element also having the same ID of blue header. You can give it a different ID. You can call it blue header 2, blue header 3, but each element should have a unique ID. On the other hand, if you want things to be grouped in the same type of style, you can, let's do these paragraphs. You can give it a class, and let's call it red text. And let's say we only wanted a couple of these paragraphs to be red, so let's make this one also red, and this one also red. Then we can add a class name to individual elements. And this one, the class, does not have to be unique. You can reuse class names. In fact, it's good if you do reuse class names to reduce repeated code. And here in style.css, we can say, again, we're going to change the color to red. And important, just like with the ID, we need to use the pound symbol. Here we need to use a period, a dot, to signify that we're calling a class. instead of, again, a type of tag or an ID. So here, let's try that out. Great, so we're now able to look at different items on our page through 3 different methods, either the type of tag, the ID, or the class. Is that making sense so far? Does anybody have any questions on that? Go ahead and just send a message in the chat if that is or isn't good, and then we can move on. Okay. Okay, I'll move on then. Next thing we're going to look at is how to add padding and margin. These are actually going to be extremely useful, extremely important when creating any web page. Spacing in general is just, it matters a lot in terms of user experience. If things are squished together, that's definitely not aesthetically pleasing, but if everything is really far apart, then that's a pain to scroll through. So let's say that we wanted to add a little bit of spacing here between item 1 and item 2. And just to get into practice using classes instead of tags or IDs, let's change the class of these to add spacing and margin. And then it'll apply to each of these objects. So we have, okay, item 1 and 2, we can add a class. Let's give it add padding. And we can add that to each of our list items. I know we could have just called the li tag, but practice using classes, I just created a new tag called add padding. And we can say .add padding. And the two attribute, or the two ways we can add padding are padding, and then something, and margin. And inside the something, we're going to put how much padding and how much margin. Usually this is measured, or often it's measured in pixels. So we can say margin padding 10 pixels. We'll only do padding for now. And you can see that these items are spaced out more. At this point, there's padding on all 4 sides of each of the .add padding elements that have this class. You'll notice that there's 10 pixels of padding on top, 10 on right, 10 on bottom, 10 on left. And let's say we didn't want that. Let's say we only wanted it on top and bottom, but not left and right. What we could do is we could say padding 10 pixels, 0 pixels. And we can run that. And that'll change the padding on the left and right. Here I'll add a comment that this is top and bottom, and this is left, right. That's what these two values are. This is top, bottom, and this is left, right. Now let's say we want to get even more specific. Let's say we wanted to change the top but not the bottom, or the left but not the right. We could, give me 1 second. Could set all four all four sides of padding at the same time. So we can say padding 10 pixels, 8 pixels, 6 pixels, 4 pixels, let's say. And that'll be top. And there will be a different amount of padding on each side. I know it's difficult to see here, but say maybe let's try and make it a little bit more obvious what we're doing here. 80, 60, and 40. See, notice how there's a different amount of padding. Here we have 100 pixels of padding above item 1. We have 60 pixels of padding below item 1, plus the 100 pixels of padding above item 2, and then 40 here below item 2. So that's padding. Let's move on and also do border and margin. So, oh, go ahead. Does someone have a question? No? Okay. Yeah, go ahead and send a chat if you have any questions at all, and I can try and answer that for you. But until then, yeah, I'll keep going. So let's add a border to our object here. We can set it to, let's say, 2 pixels solid, and then just pick a color, blue. And you can see that there's a large border here around each of our items. And so here's where the difference between padding and margin really shows itself. Let's say we have these borders that we want here. Let's try and make this a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Just make it I'll keep it in the same format here, but I'll make it all 10 pixels. Let's say we wanted these spaced out a little bit more, even though we have 10 pixels of padding between items, item 1 in the border and item 2 in the border. These two borders are slammed up against each other, which obviously doesn't look great. So that's where margin comes in. While padding is between the item, or between the text and the border, the margin is outside the border and between the two elements. So let's say we add padding. There, that looks better. Let's say we add some margin. And you can see now that everything is spaced out much nicer. Okay. A couple of other useful things that you can do. For text, let's say we wanted to center our header, we can, under H1, do text align center. Just a couple of useful things that we can add to our page. We can also do text align right, and it'll show up on the right-hand side of the page. But for now, we'll center it again. And another thing I wanted to go over is resizing images. Notice here how the image goes way off the page. So you have to scroll left and right to see it. And that's obviously not what we want. So in the style, let's just call the image. We can set the width to any size we want. Let's say we want it 300 pixels. And the height should automatically resize itself to maintain its aspect ratio. If you want it to be a certain size, you can change the height as well, but then the image will be distorted. So let's say we want it a width of 300 pixels. This is great, but it's only ever going to be 300 pixels. No matter what size our page is, let's say we're on mobile, it's going to be 300 pixels. But if our page is huge on desktop, it's also going to be 300 pixels. So what if there was a way to make the image resize to the width of the page? Actually, there is. And instead of setting it to a certain pixel size, we can set it to a percent, which is the percent of, in this case, the width of the page. So let's run that again. Let's not make it 300%, let's make it 100%. So 100% the width of the page. And you'll see that when we increase the size of the page, then we still have an image that is the same width as our page. And this percent, that operator, I guess, it's not really an operator, but that percent can be used in other places as well. We can set the margin to 10% instead of 10 pixels. We can set borders, padding. It's just another way to describe the size. So yeah, let's see. What else? Font size. Font and font size. Let's say we want to change the size of our text, our header. Size pixels, and we can make that really small, make it really big. For now, I'll make it 40. And you can play around with all of this stuff as well to just see what it does, see what you can do to change it, make it look a little bit better, personalize it a bit. Oh, looks like we have a question. How can you set the position of an image? What exactly do you mean? Like, do you want it more? If you want it in front of the headers, you can move the tag. That'll make it under. Oh, the header will be under the image. To center or to move it around on the screen. I see. So to center, we can also actually do the here. I'll make it set size. Let's make it half the size of the page, and we can actually do the same alignment. For images, that's going to be a little bit different. Let's see, Armand, to position it, we can change left and right attributes, top, bottom, left, and right. Yes, actually that's true. For absolute or fixed positioning, we can set, where's our image here? Position to absolute. And we can move it in front or behind different things. So here we're kind of taking it out of the general structure of the page. And let's say we want it, at this point it's anchored right here, but we can say top 50 pixels. And it'll be 50 pixels here from the top of the page. We can say left 50 pixels. And it'll be left. It'll be 50 pixels from the left-hand side of the page. For centering the image, I'll get back to that. For centering just things in general, we talked about margin of 10%, 10 pixels, just different size margins. One way that you can just center things in general is to set margin to auto. Let's see. Usually this can be done in something. I'll use a text element to show this one. Paragraph ID equals wait, I didn't ID. There we go. And this item, where is it? Did I do item 1? This is I see. Okay. So first, actually, we need to set the width. There we go. So what we have here is a paragraph with a width of 50 pixels and a margin auto, which means it's going to automatically put the same amount of margin on the left and right of this object. Can spread this out a little bit. Kind of works in the same way that text align center works, except that's for text. This is for elements. The way you can differentiate it, and here I'd like to introduce something called inspect element. I'm not sure if you've either played around with this or seen it before. Are you able to see my dev tools here? Here, I'll dock it on the side. Here. This is actually a really useful tool to use. When you're looking at your page elements, you can see here, like this is my header. You can see different information about it, color, font, margins. The orange will show, the orange color will show how much margin is there. When there's green, the green will show how much padding is around your element. So the way to center things really depends on what your element looks like. See how this text element is the full width of the screen here? Because since we talked about how margin is actually outside of an object, setting the margin to auto, the size of the element is actually all of this blue. So it's already the full width of the screen. So centering it isn't actually going to do anything. Instead, what you want to do is text align center, which centers the text inside the object. Here, however, when we have a small object, we would use margin auto to add this orange margin here, an equal amount on both sides. So DevTools here is a really, really useful thing to play around with. You can look at this is actually all of the HTML of the page here. So you can look at just the different elements. You can change things. So let's say we wanted to change something about this element from DevTools. We can set the width to 80 pixels. And we can play around with that. And when we refresh the page, it'll all be temporary so that it's all local, so that you can make small adjustments, see how they look, and then update them in your code. So I know that was a lot to take in. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Either now I think we can spend a little bit more time here, or send me a message through Discord. Does anybody have any last questions? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Thank you all for coming to the Intro to Web Design workshop. I hope you were able to take something away from it. Definitely, if you have any questions at all, reach out to me and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you all for coming.